Now that the Portuguese and the Spanish have laid claim to large chunks of territory in Africa, Asia, and in the New World and the Caribbean, the challenge will be for them to be able to enforce their authority over these new areas. And remember, when Columbus had set sail, this part of the world was just a blank, watery nothing. Each time the explorers come back, the age of exploration, these are the times of famous people like Magellan and Da Gama and Henry Hudson and John Cabot. There's lots of these people who are probably noted in your textbook, but the goal here is to note that the Europeans, now that they have discovered that there's more worlds, are emphasizing the idea of trying to go out and find new places, to exploit them economically, or to find a way to a faster traveling to the East Asian markets, whatever it is. There's lots of motivations here for people to explore increasingly Africa, Asia, and the New World for lots of reasons. And there's always going to be the conversation within this exploration. Were they doing it simply for the betterment of Christianity? Were they doing it for glory, for the sense of self-exploration and how great I am, I discovered something? Are they doing it simply for the profit motive? Or is it some combination of all those things? So when you take a look at the European exploration of the world, make sure that you understand that it's a real mix of motives. There's lots of people involved in doing different things, and they're each going to take their time in understanding where they're going. Now, this world map, I'm just having you use it for a second, is to show you that, remember, when Columbus set sail, it was a blank nothing. And now it's being filled in slowly by slowly. It's still not 100% accurate, as we would understand, using some GPS system of looking at the globe. But they are increasingly able to fill in the spaces here and make some more accurate judgments of the distance between locations, port facilities, where land is and where it is not, where the oceans stop and start. Instead of having just nothing but conjecture, they're increasingly having a clear idea. But here's the other part. If the Spanish had succeeded at exploring various things after the Portuguese had done something, well, with those two models, anybody else in Europe that has the power and the interest could then, of course, sponsor some other naval voyages. This is where the Dutch, the French, and the English increasingly are going to be looking at overseas colonization and business opportunities, and it will be sort of a showdown between those major European powers, who can control the space, who can control the markets, and there will be warfare that will result over attempts at controlling territories around the world. Now, one of the things about Columbus was that, remember, one of the key things that is about the era of Columbus is what's called the Columbian Exchange. And what we mean by that historically is we take a look at certain products, animals, and diseases that were existing in one place of the world and now are going to be exported to the other parts of the world. As people connect, using the idea of cultural contact and cultural borrowing, they're going to be borrowing everything back and forth from food to fashion to, of course, diseases. And here's what's going to happen. Part of the Columbian Exchange is that there's several vital plants from the New World that will be exported back to Asia, Africa, and Europe and become very much a part of their future historical development. One of them, remember, the New World is where maize is from. Many modern Americans refer to it as corn, but maize is that very dense, easy to grow in lots of different kinds of soil types plant that gives a lot of food value for a very small piece of territory. Also, there is within the New World a significant number of varieties of potatoes, various different kinds and sizes. Once again, a high calorie content plant that is relatively tolerant of many lousy soils and cold weather, can be grown higher up in the mountains. This is a way then for high quality calories to be injected back into Europe, Africa, and Asia, where they'll be able to grow more food, have more calories on smaller pieces of property, and thus this could in part set off a population increase. If nothing else, it could also stabilize the nutritional level because, for example, potatoes have better nutritional level than some of the grains grown in Europe. They both supply a lot of calories, but as long as you eat the skin of the potato, there is another element that's brought into the nutritional factor. What's also going to be a problem, well, maybe a problem for some, will be that tobacco. This plant in the New World is going to increasingly be grown. It will be smoked by many people in the New World. It has lots of ceremonial and medicinal understandings, but it's going to be exported back to Europe where it's going to become sort of a rich man's idol time experience to sit and have some pipe tobacco or to roll a cigar. Tobacco will be extremely lucrative in the New World. It will be a very, very powerful thing in the early American experience. For example, the creation of colonies in Delaware and in Maryland and Virginia. Tobacco growing will be vital. Also, there will be something even more valuable for many people, and that will be, of course, the creation of an Italian diet with tomatoes in it, right? Tomatoes are a New World plant that will be exported back to the Mediterranean and other places. People will find the use for them, and they will continue to do so. Now, on the other hand, there's some things that come to the New World, okay? For example, olives and olive trees, traditional in Mediterranean society. Sheep, grapes, other varieties of grapes. Lots of plants and animals will be going back and forth each side of the Atlantic, and it's going to really change the way that land is used, and it's also going to change the diet of many people as we move forward. Increasingly, for example, an old world crop called sugar cane, which is from the old world, will be brought into the new world and set off a huge combination of plantation agriculture based on exporting massive amounts of sugar back to Europe. We'll talk about that in time. Now, when the Portuguese and Spanish had an understanding that they were going to divide the world amongst themselves, they got involved with the papacy, and they had the Pope put together a treaty. And in 1494, they sort of agreed to divide the world down an imaginary line on the globe. Everything on one side was going to be Spanish. Everything on the other side was going to be Portuguese. Essentially, this line goes through what you know as modern-day Brazil. That's why Brazil is, of course, Portuguese-speaking, because it will be a Portuguese colony for quite some time. And then everything on the other side of the line is going to be Spanish. That of course, was between the Spanish and the Portuguese. Nobody told the Dutch, the French, or the English, and if they did, they weren't listening. So on the margins here, all this new territory that's being opened up around the world, in Asia, Africa, and the New World, is now up for grabs. The European power that has the best ability to go and exploit those regions, build trade networks, establish military colonies, they're going to be the ones who will be able to profit the most. And much of this time period is going to be a deep, deep military struggle between the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, and the English, as each of them, one way or the other, tries to create their own trade companies, exploit international resources as best as possible, get involved increasingly in the slave trade, as well as in the exploitation of indigenous peoples everywhere. Take a close look at this age of exploration, especially the idea that now much of the world is up for grabs, so to speak, and the European power that is willing to use the most violence and to use it as fast as possible may also get the best commercial advantage. Be sure to see if there's any questions in your sample test bank to also help you understand this time frame.